So good morning. Good morning. I'm Dr. Linda Wiley, as you've heard, and let me just say that I absolutely love the work that I do, and I always consider it not only a pleasure but a privilege when people allow me their time so that I can come in and share a little bit of what I know. You did not get much on my background, and I'm not going to give you much, but I do want you to know that I have studied this academically. In fact, the topic of my doctoral dissertation was on diversity and inclusion. At that time, I'd like to think it was just a few years ago, but actually it was a little longer than that. But at that time, there was not much documented on the relationship between things like race, gender, and your level in the organization and how empowered you felt to do your job. So my dissertation helped to document some of that stuff. I've worked internally for a number of different corporations, different parts of the country. And I've been an independent consultant off and on for over 20 years now. Most recently, I restarted my business. I'm Atlanta-based. I restarted my business 2.5 years ago, I think it was, after leaving Chattanooga. I was here for 2.5 years. I was senior manager of diversity and inclusion at one of the major corporations in the area. You probably know, I'm not going to say it at this point, just in case I need to tell you stories about them. You can't say that I identified where that came from, okay? We'll just keep it our little secret, you, me, and the camera. But I have the distinction, I guess, of studying this academically, working internally, and working externally. So I've seen this from a number of different perspectives. I'll also point out that the initials after my name, the CDE, stands for Certified Diversity Executive through the Society for Diversity. The CRS is Certified Relationship Specialist through the American Psychotherapy Association. So it puts me in a unique space because we know that when we're talking about diversity, we're not just talking about how many of these and how many of those. And when we're talking about inclusion, we're not just talking about making sure that everybody has a seat at the table. I love the book Lean In, but if we're not all in the room, we can't all lean into the table. So inclusion also has to take into consideration the whole dynamics of interrelatedness and relationships. What does it take to have a healthy relationship? And so my background in relationships helps with that as well. And just as a sidebar that I think is an interesting fact is that certification doesn't only apply to workplace relationships. I do have a book on relationships. The book is called Tame Your Tongue and Transform Your Relationship. And I do give advice on radio in Atlanta. I've been on television talking about romantic relationships. So that's another workshop, but just put that out there.
Can you weave it in?
See me at lunch. Because it all does come into play. When we enter this place called the workplace, all of that stuff comes with you. And so I think it's important that you understand that all of that come to bear, and I am in that space. I have not come across any of my colleagues who, a few of them might have certifications in diversity, but I've not come across anyone that's certified in diversity and the relationships to be able to weave all of that stuff together. Now, having said that, yes.
You were also on the board of the Urban League, promoter.
Yes. I was a board member for the Urban League, which is part of the reason that I got to know the power players in this whole thing, for them to be able to call on me and ask me to do this. And I still serve on the board of the Bessie Smith Cultural Center. I make that trip up because that was just so important to me. I relinquished my seat so that somebody else from my corporation could sit on the Urban League board, but I took a personal interest in the Bessie, and so I still sit on that board, and I come back for those board meetings, et cetera. So yeah, thank you for that. So as leaders, what I want to do today, because I know that you've had diversity and inclusion training, you understand the concepts, you know what it's focused on, what we're trying to do. But have you had the deeper conversation that really gets at some of the interconnectedness? And a lot of the comments, in fact, Larry and I served on a board together as well. I started the East Tennessee chapter of ABE, which is the American Association of Blacks in Energy. And so I was the first chapter president, and Larry was pulled into, but he came willingly, and he served on my board as the treasurer. So, no, secretary, I'm sorry. But as business leaders, we know that every decision that you make is going to have a ripple effect throughout your organization. It's going to touch people because you're creating policies and practices and programs and developing people. It's going to have an impact. But one of the things we're going to talk about today is getting outside of the walls of the corporation. Because what you need to understand, particularly as you move up in the organization, is that what you do not only has impact inside those walls, but it has impact outside in the real world. And what happens in the real world has impact inside your organization. In fact, the second half of this afternoon, you are going to do all the work. I'm going to give you what I call life application cases, and you're going to break them down based on all of the information that I give you up until that point. And so we're going to look at things like, there are 3 groups, so I have to figure out, I came prepared with 4 cases, so I'll pull one out. But one that we're going to talk about has to do with President Trump's travel ban. And so what biases and assumptions might be inherent in that travel ban? And how does a ban such as that impact you in the workplace today? Even if you're not from any of those 7 countries, don't know anybody, don't have any family or friends from there, maybe you don't even operate globally, your company might be just locally based, there's still an impact that it has. And whatever decisions you make are going to impact the world. So we'll take a look at that as one case example. Another case example we'll look at is the doctor that was dragged off the United Airlines flight. How does that impact? What biases might have been there? Another one that we'll look at today, Bill Riley. The firing of Bill Riley. That's probably one of my favorites. Whenever I would go into, not my favorite firing, Ken, though it's on the top 10, but one of my favorite cases for us to take a look at. And the reason I say that is, as I go in and out of corporate America, you go into almost any break room, and I promise you what's on the television 8 times out of 10 is Fox News. 8 times out of 10. If you don't understand that there's a continuum from MSNBC to CNN to Fox, and if you don't understand that the perspectives that they're giving are colored by their own personal beliefs and biases, then the news that you're getting in some cases is not necessarily the news. And so we need to take a look at that. And then the 4th one, I'm sure I will include this one, is local. Chattanooga Times Free Press in April did an article that talked about the attitude shift after the election in April, the local elections. And so the folks in Chattanooga who voted are the people that work in your organization. So what caused the attitude shift, and how will these new politicians who replace some of our long-standing friends like a Moses Freeman or Yusef Hakeem, Yusef and I sat on the board together as well for the Bessie. Moses and I are both part of Chattanooga Connected, another grassroots organization here. And so how do some of these shifts impact the culture in your workplace? So as I said, the last half of our afternoon is going to be spent on you digging into that. But I've got to set the stage in the morning. So some of this information might be familiar to you, but we've got to make sure we're all on the same playing field. And I did stay away from some of the more basic fundamental things. At your level, I'm making the assumption that you have some basic foundational information around diversity and inclusion and what those things mean. But because this is a conversation, at any point in time, feel free to stop me with questions or comments. You can push back. You don't have to agree with everything I say. You'll be wrong, but you don't have to agree with everything I say.
Megan's like, challenge.
You have to do, we have a long day ahead of us and a lot of time to spend together. And so I interject my personality, I interject humor into this because I want you to feel comfortable to do the same thing. You know, one of my favorite books says, as iron sharpens iron, so does man sharpen man. The only way we're going to get better individually or collectively is if we do have some dialogue. So feel free to speak up and potentially disagree with me or anyone else in the room. I recognize that you all are at different levels. Even though we're all trying to get into the C-suite, some of you are a little closer to that than others. So I want to make sure that you understand the focus I'm going to have today. And let's start at the bottom. Maxwell says the entry level for leadership is called position. Position is basically management. People follow you not because of anything about you as a leader. They follow you because the organizational chart says they have to follow you. It says you are supervisor or manager or something. You are my boss. I have to do what you say do. So it's basically management. It's a compliance type of position. But what you want to do is move then to level 2, which is permission. And permission really is where leadership really begins, because that's where you start influencing people. And people are following you not because they have to, but they've seen something in you that makes them want to. They've developed some sort of relationship with you, and based on that relationship, they are invested in making sure that you're successful. But you can't stop there, and unfortunately many of us do. We get comfortable with relationships. We know that we can get the work out of the people we need to get work from when we need to get it, and we don't set our sights on going higher. But level 3, production, is what the folks 1 or 2 levels above you are really taking a look at. Are you getting the results? Are people complying enough, or are the relationships significant enough that you're getting the work done? And that's really what it's all about. So you want to make sure that you at least get to the production level. But level 4 is the people level. And a lot of what we talk about with diversity and inclusion really hinges on the people level. And in order to get the most out of your people, you have to know who they are. You have to know what biases and assumptions they bring to the table. You have to know what experiences they have had. You have to be able to see the world from their perspective. And most importantly, you have to create an environment where there's room for your view and their view. If people were to approach it the way I joked with you a moment ago about you would be wrong if you differed from me, if you get that sense in your organization, people are not going to speak up and share the best of who they are and what they know. So that environment has to be one where folks feel as if, yes, I am being fully developed, my opinions matter, my perspective is being heard. Most people in leadership don't get beyond the people level. But number 5 really is sort of like the pinnacle. That's the holy grail of leadership. And Maxwell calls it personhood. That's when you've left a legacy. That's when there's a building named after you. That's when there's a program named after you. That's when people equate your name with something. Like when we think safety, we think this individual. When we think what Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee has done for diversity and inclusion, we think Ron Harris. You know, whatever it happens to be, that's the pinnacle. And where we will focus today is on level 4, the people, because this is where leaders develop other leaders. And that's what you're required to do when you get to the levels that you're aspiring to reach. It's not just up to you to be a good leader, but how many leaders have you developed? Who could step in your shoes should you walk away? This is where we start talking about things like succession planning. We all know we've got those who are ready now, you know, ready in 12 months, ready in 18 months. It's not enough to just place them in those buckets, but when they're in the bucket, what are you doing as a leader to get them to that ready now position? So most of our time will be spent on this people side. With that as a backdrop, here's what we're going to do today. I've got an overarching goal for you that we'll break down into 4 objectives. So the goal of the day is to move you beyond the walls of your organization so you can see how your decisions impact the world, and actually vice versa. Unemployment rates, you know, there's a connection. If people aren't working, then that means they don't have, for the most part, health benefits. If they don't have health benefits, that's impacting our medical systems. If they're not working, it limits where they can live, where they can send their children to school. If they're not working, it's going to have some impact on the judicial system. How many people are being sent to prison because in order to feed their family, they felt as if they had no other choice. So again, this is not just a workplace issue. This is a societal issue, and my overall goal for the day is to help you see some of that interconnectedness. The 4 objectives, one is to learn to recognize unconscious bias. Now, you probably talked about it. You may have had some courses on it, but recognize it in yourself and in others and how it impacts business decisions. This is one of those things where, you know, it's interesting. Sometimes earlier on, like I told you, I've been in this field for quite some time. Early on, whites, particularly white males, would feel like, okay, they were being targeted and we're picking on them. So they would feel like diversity was not for them. And then I would speak sometimes to groups that were women and people of color, and sometimes feel like they would ask the question, why are we here? This is all about us. We know this. No, neither one of us gets the ticket on this one. We have collaborative work that we have to do. And it really is, okay, so I'm a consultant, so you know that I am on and off planes all of the time. The message that stands out for me in relation to this is when that flight attendant is going through the safety procedures and it's time to talk about the oxygen mask, what do they say?
Put it on yourself first.
Put the mask on yourself first, and then assist others. And that's exactly what we have to do here. We've got to put the mask on ourselves first, or in this case, take the mask off of yourself first and then look at others. Another objective is to explore emotional intelligence. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there because I know you've had a full day session on emotional intelligence. I don't know the content of it, but I'm sure there's overlap between what I would say and what that facilitator said. But what we will do is pull from some of the pearls of wisdom I'm sure you received so that you can see how EQ is a dimension of diversity and how it can increase productivity. Objective number 3 is to understand diversity and inclusion as the business imperative that it is. I know you've got some understanding there. And then 4 is to explore the relationship between the level of trust and the capacity to create a diverse and inclusive culture. Trust is emerging for me as a sustainability factor when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And in fact, you know, again, Ron Harris was visionary enough to have me come in and work with his lead or my organization. I didn't do it personally, one of my facilitators did, but to work with the organization around trust and how it impacts diversity. Because if diversity and inclusion training works, and we know that it does, it's just a matter of what are your objectives and your expectations and did you meet them? I think sometimes people set their expectations here, the program comes in here and they want to say it didn't work. It worked for what it was designed to do. You were just out of alignment with respect to your expectations. But we know diversity and inclusion training works. So if it works, why is it that we have to keep doing it year after year after year? And why is it that in 2017 we still don't get it? Well, a lot of that has to do with the environment that was created, that culture. And if there's no trust, it doesn't matter what you say to me or what you do or how you treat me. I'm always going to have in the back of my mind, what's your hidden agenda? What are you really trying to do here? So we need to talk a little bit about trust as well. That's pretty much how the day will flow. I want to get us started right away with an activity. So I'm going to share with you a 30-second story. And I'm going to ask you to please just close your eyes and visualize what it is that I'm saying, okay? So close your eyes. Imagine that you are driving down, let's say, Market Street, and you're going at a high speed. A car speeds past you, music is blasting, they go through a stop sign, and as you catch up to them, you notice that they were pulled over by the police and drugs were found in the car. Okay, open your eyes. Now, I want you to just yell out whatever answer comes to mind. How many people do you think were in the car?